Hi guys, it's me Jamie, and today I'm going to be doing my top 10 books of 2019. Now this isn't necessarily the books published in 2019, but they're the best ones that I read for the first time last year. It's so funny, it feels weird to me because this is around the time last year that I actually started my booktube channel, and it feels really full circle because I think this is one of the first videos I made for 2018 as well. So I don't know, I just wanted to mention that it feels like right that I'm doing this video again. I feel satisfied, but yeah, you guys don't really care about that. So let's just get into the top 10 books. This is in no particular order. Let's just get started. So one of the first books I'm going to mention is going to come to no surprise to anyone, but that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I experienced a lot in 2019 in terms of my journey on booktube, and I thought it was necessary when I first started to basically read booktube's golden child of 2018, and I was not disappointed. It lives up to all the hype. I absolutely loved it, and this actually prompted me to start the Taylor Jenkins read along with my friends Jacob and Isabella, which we did for most of 2019. But yeah, I'm sure you guys don't need to know the synopsis of this because I feel like everyone has explained it at least once on their channel. But I completely fell in love with the characters and the world that Taylor Jenkins Reid created with a sort of fictional old Hollywood, in terms of the fact that like there were all these famous people that were completely made up, and these movies that Evelyn was in and won Oscars for that just like didn't exist in real life. So I just really loved this really super hyper realistic world of Hollywood and this picture of Hollywood that Taylor Jenkins Reid painted. I cannot wait to see the TV show because they are making a TV show, and I'm so glad that this book introduced me to Daisy Jones and the Six and also helped me bond with Isabella and Jacob. I have a lot to thank this book for in terms of my friendships and my journey on booktube. So yeah, of course I had to mention this as one of my favorites of 2019. Another one is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I actually listened to this on audiobook for the first time, but eventually I really want to get to doing a reread physically because it's just one of those books that instantly hooks you. I had always heard about this book, but I really wasn't sure what it was about. But now I know, and it is about a girl who is in love with this podcast. She's totally obsessed with it. She does fan art for it. And then one day she realizes that the anonymous creator of this podcast is actually a guy that she knows in real life. They end up becoming very close friends and working together until their identities are exposed and people find out who they are, and they have this massive fan base, and all of a sudden they're trying to cope with all this fame, which is one of my favorite tropes ever, is people coming into fame and learning to deal with it. I love that. But I just felt like the characters, they felt so realistic to me. Frances and Aled their friendship was so beautiful. I love stories where the main relationship is strictly platonic and you can see how much they love each other, but in a completely friendship sort of way. I don't know, I just absolutely loved it. I loved the writing style. It felt totally relatable, and it really spoke to my teenage experience in terms of being part of these fandoms and being obsessed with something and spending your entire life on Tumblr basically. I just found it so endearing and I loved it so much, and I would 100% recommend it to absolutely everyone. 2019 was also the year that I really dived deep into fantasy, and one of the main fantasy books that I absolutely adored was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Now this is a huge book. It's giant. It's over 700 pages and it's an adult fantasy, and I absolutely adored it. I fell in love with Brandon Sanderson's writing style. I loved the characters in this book. I loved the world. I thought it was such a unique magic system. So basically The Final Empire is very political. It tells us of this kingdom which is kind of run by this dictator called the Lord Ruler, and basically there are these rich families and people that live in poverty, and there are also a type of people that have become slaves. And The Final Empire follows a young girl called Vin who has lived her life on the streets, and a guy called Kalzir who's kind of like a revolutionary leader. He's got these massive ideas to overthrow the government. So they kind of get together, this like motley crew, and they come up with a plan to commit this heist to overthrow the government, to overthrow the Lord Ruler. It's just so good. I loved it so much. Like I said, it has a really unique magic system, but I felt that the way it was told was never ever info dumpy. It was weaved in so well into the story. We're basically learning about the magic system at the same time as Vin, our protagonist, is. So it was just super entertaining, super addicting. I absolutely loved it. And next year I'm going to try and finish the series. There are 2 other books in the series, and then there are like companion series as well that kind of are in the same world. So I definitely want to read those and read more of Brandon Sanderson's works, but I definitely recommend, if you are getting into adult fantasy, pick up this one. It's absolutely amazing. Another book I want to talk about is kind of gave me the same feels as Radio Silence, but that is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. Now this is a tiny little contemporary book. I would say that it's new adult, but not really. I only say new adult because the 2 main characters are university students. It is basically entirely set on campus, but it is just so beautiful. This book is such a simple story about a girl who has lost her entire family and she feels completely lost in the past year, so she decides to spend the winter break in college on her campus when no one is around, and she actually gets a visit from her ex-best friend from the old town that she used to live in. So they're trying to rekindle their quite broken friendship and their broken relationship, and during this we find out all this information about what went down in the year previous and the year before that, before they both go to college and going their separate ways. We find out why they went their separate ways and why they are the way they are now. It was just so beautiful and such an intimate little story of friendship and love, and I just adored this so much. I honestly don't know how to explain it without making it sound kind of boring, because it is so beautiful in its simplicity. Like, the plot isn't super crazy, but the development of the characters and the relationship and the way that the story is told is just absolutely stunning. I cannot recommend it enough, and if you really want a short kind of melancholic slash heartwarming read, if that makes sense, I would definitely pick this one up because it's just incredible. Another book I fell in love with is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I loved this book so much. It is a YA mystery thriller about a girl whose younger sister is murdered, and then Sadie, she's the main character, she decides to go on a mission to try and avenge her sister's death. And so then she ends up becoming a missing girl as well, and we're told from 2 perspectives. We are told from a true crime podcast, and the story is also told from Sadie's perspective. So we basically get to know what's going on at home, what happened with the murder and leading up to the murder of the younger sister, and we also get to find out what's happening in present tense with Sadie, where she is, while the true crime podcast is kind of asking those questions. They get answered in Sadie's chapters. This book is heavy as well. It has some really heavy topics like child abuse and sexual abuse and obviously violence and murder and everything, but it's done so delicately and so well. I just can't recommend this book enough. I read it in like 1 sitting. I was completely addicted. And if you want a really fast read, I would definitely recommend this one. It was just so amazing, and I cannot wait to reread it again. I know everyone is probably sick of me talking about this because I talked about it for the majority of last year, but it's just amazing. So definitely read it if you haven't and see what I'm talking about. The next book I want to talk about is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This was one of my first 5 stars of last year, and it was just so beautiful, and it's just one of those books that's so good I actually struggle to explain what it's about because I feel like I don't do it justice. Basically, we follow these 2 families, a rich white family who live in this suburb and have lived in this really posh suburb their whole life, and a mother and daughter duo who are new to the city, and they move in and they're kind of weird. They're artists. They don't fit in right away, except for the daughter. The daughter ends up becoming best friends with the rich white family, but the mother kind of struggles to fit in with these rich people in this new neighborhood. But what's the most important thing about this book isn't those 2 families, but the backdrop that they are living in. And while we spend most of our time with these 2 families, the biggest conflict is actually between some of the side characters, and it's about a young Asian woman who abandoned her child because she wasn't fit to look after her about maybe like 3 years prior, and another rich white family who have then adopted that child as their own, and it becomes this sort of custody battle, and it becomes this really interesting discussion about whether the child should stay with their birth mother and be with their heritage and learn more about their heritage and who they are, or if they should be with this new family and get to live a more privileged life but is completely out of touch with their Chinese heritage. I just found it so interesting because the author doesn't have a biased view of the argument at all or of the conflict. You end up wondering who's right and who's wrong. You actually have no idea. and I just found it so interesting. I really loved this book. I definitely want to reread it. Again, I feel like I haven't done it justice in the way I've talked about it, but the writing style is so beautiful. There are definitely some passages that I saved on Goodreads because it was just such a beautiful tale about family and fitting in, but then also this other massive issue that's going on but is sort of in the background as a subplot. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just so good, can't recommend it enough. Another book that I would die for that I read in 2019 was Vicious by V.E. Schwab. It was my first V.E. Schwab book and I had the best time reading this. It was amazing. I don't know why, but I'm almost getting emotional talking about it because this is one of the first books that I buddy read. I buddy read with Angela from Blonde Books, and she was one of my first friends on BookTube as well, and it was just so good. And I remember I read it for the BookTube Games, which was like a readathon that Mayana from Little Wolf Reads hosted, and I ended up reading it so fast, absolutely falling in love with it. And this kind of sums up my BookTube experience because it was also one of the first books I annotated as well, and I just remember reading this so vividly, basically around this time last year, and oh my god, I just love it so much. But anyway, enough of that kind of gush. This book is told in a non-linear format. We follow these two students at college, Victor and Eli, who have to do a science project, and Eli decides to do his science project on these things called extraordinaries, and they are basically people who have superpowers, and to get that superpower they have to have died for like a millisecond and then come back to life. So Eli starts this project and in turn ends up making him and his friend Victor extraordinaries. And then the other storyline that we follow is about 30 years later. A whole lot of stuff has gone down. Victor's been to jail and basically they are fighting. Neither of them know who's the hero and who's the villain. As a reader, it's pretty easy to gather who you're rooting for. Victor Vale, my boyfriend, who is just absolutely stunning. Honestly, it's told so well. The writing style is so clever. You end up loving these characters. Like, you hate Eli, but you also just love reading about him so much. There were so many funny lines. I absolutely loved the development, the way that the story was told, and this is 100% one of my favorite books. I cannot wait to do a reread of this. I absolutely adored it. I cannot wait to read more of V.E. Schwab's books. It's just stunning. I honestly have nothing else to say about this. I love it so much. Another book that I want to talk about is one that I'll absolutely die for, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This has been on my TBR since I read The Secret History like 7 years ago. This has been on my TBR for such a long time. I am so glad I finally read it. I cannot believe I didn't read it sooner. So essentially this is just a retelling of the Iliad, but it's from the perspective of Patroclus, who is a much smaller character in the Iliad, and it tells the story of him and his relationship with Achilles, who is very much one of the heroes of the Iliad. I don't want to give away too much, even though the Iliad is like thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. Like, it's a bit silly to worry about spoilers, but I feel like you just need to read this without knowing that much. It's just so beautiful. I ended up being caught by surprise. Even though I literally know the story of the Iliad and I knew it going in, I still was caught by surprise at like the most pivotal moments. I just adored it so much. The writing style was beautiful. I've tabbed so much of it. It was heartbreaking. I cried so much. And Achilles and Patroclus are just such amazing characters. I loved reading about their relationship and how it developed, and I just love them so much. And that's all I can really say about this book. Is just, it's so beautiful. The writing style is stunning. It's somehow super fast paced while being super descriptive. Oh, I love you. I love you. Madeline Miller Write More Books Challenge, thank you. The next book I'm going to talk about is God's Grave by J. Kristoff. I am obsessed with this series. I was going to do Nevernight, but then I decided I actually had a better reading experience reading God's Grave just because it was so unexpected. So I feel like I've talked so much about Nevernight and you kind of know what the series is about, but basically it's about this girl Mia who is going to avenge her parents because her parents were high politicians and then they were murdered, and then she kind of became on the run. She trained as an acolyte, as an assassin, and then she went to this like school for assassins and trained up, and basically her whole motive is just to kill the people that killed her father. So that's what Nevernight's about. I don't want to talk about God's Grave because there are so many spoilers in the actual plot of God's Grave for Nevernight, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I would just say it was so good. There is a relationship in God's Grave that I absolutely adore. The final page of God's Grave snatched my wig right off my scalp and threw it into oblivion. Like, I don't know where it is anymore because of God's Grave doing that to me. I just love it. I just love it. Probably like the best second book in a series I've ever read. Obsessed with it. Nothing else to say. Thank you, J. Christoph. And the last book I'm going to talk about is kind of appropriate right after God's Grave, but it is actually Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor, another sequel. Don't get me wrong, I loved Strange the Dreamer, but Muse of Nightmares was just so great. I think because we had already established a relationship with Laszlo and Sarai, we knew the characters so well, and then we explored so much more of them in Muse of Nightmares. The writing, again, was just so beautiful, and there's one character in Muse of Nightmares who was so expertly developed. You learned so much more about her. Character development was like the sole reason that I loved this book so much. I loved reading everything about her. She's such an interesting character. If you've read the series, you probably know which character I'm talking about by now, but it was just so beautiful. It just was the perfect wrap up to a duology. I actually read Daughter of Smoke and Bone, Laini Taylor's other series, back in high school. I can't remember anything of it, but I really want to do a reread of it because I remember really liking the writing style, and of course Laini Taylor's writing style in this is just amazing. So yeah, that is another series that I really want to reread because of Muse of Nightmares and Strange the Dreamer. But yeah, this one was so beautiful, and I actually buddy read this with Yasmin, and it was such a lovely experience buddy reading with her. It was the first buddy read we did, and I just adored it. So yeah, that is everything. I'm so sorry if this video was really incoherent and disorganized. I haven't done a video in a really long time, so yeah, bear with me as I kind of get my shit together again. But yeah, those were my top 10 books of 2019. Let me know what your favorite book of 2019 was. Let me know if you've read any of these, and yeah, I'll talk to you very soon in another video, hopefully. Okay, bye.